Have you ever thought, nah, it's just annoying when you interacted with a two-factor authentication mechanism? You are not alone. And in this talk, we will dive deeply into user perceptions of two-factor authentication. Without further ado, let's start with a brief introduction into two-factor authentication. Each authentication mechanism belongs into one of three authentication factor categories. The first one is knowledge. That is something you know, like a password or PIN. The second one is ownership. That is something in your possession, like a physical token or a key. The third one is inherence. That is a biometric feature of yourself. That is something you are, like your fingerprint or your voice. If we now combine two of them of different categories, we have two-factor authentication. In the context of banking and financial transactions, we have mostly a combination of knowledge and ownership. Knowledge in the form of a password and ownership in the form of a freshly generated one-time password. This is generated by different possibilities. The first one is a one-time password generator, something you can put on your keyring. There are also calculator-like devices that use information on the debit card how to calculate a one-time password. And more recently, we also have mobile apps and smartphones, and I guess many of you use something like this already. There are a lot of interesting studies that investigated user perceptions and usability of these devices, and they showed that in general, people can interact with them, and usability is okay-ish. I'm saying ish because there were a lot of hints in related work on shortcomings, like, for instance, participants in studies perceived authentication as too long. To dive a little bit deeper into that, we did semi-structured interviews with 42 participants. Half of them were rather experienced because they came from a country that mandates 2FA for banking transactions, and they also reported to use 2FA frequently. The other half was rather inexperienced because they were from countries where 2FA in banking context was not mandatory, and they reported to use it like occasionally. So both had experiences, both groups, but they were rather different. In our interviews, we talked with them about their experiences in the past, focusing on the one hand on negative ones, but we also didn't want to neglect the positive ones. We also spoke about preferences in terms of what kind of mechanisms they like to use and why, and specific factor realizations. We analyzed our interview results with semantic analysis and identified three overarching categories of results. The first ones were mostly about specific experiences the participants had. Then we also focused on the experience problems in our results, for instance, availability issues. So we confirmed a lot of the hints that we had in related work earlier. And we spoke with them specifically on the realizations of the second factor. Remember, as I said earlier, those are these little like calculator-like devices or the smartphones that I had on the other slide. On the one hand, we wanted to know about like properties and expectations of the second factor, because for security reasons, it must be different from the device where you authenticate on. And also we wanted to know about the interactions that participants wanted to perform. And this is also, reflected here in our results. So we show what kind of properties of these factors people expect, user preferences, and also how they want to interact with it. Based on these three categories of results, we distilled 10 final recommendations. So our recommendations come in two sets. The first focuses on interaction design, and the second one on security, but again, more like on the user side. And in the remainder of this little talk, let's talk about our 10 recommendations. The first set is, as I said earlier, based on interaction design. And here we have two groups. The first one is based on the location. Pure and 2FA mechanisms are mostly designed to be used in a static environment. You have your computer in front of you, you're in your office, and you have the calculator readily available next to you. However, the way people interact with devices and might do transactions and login procedures drastically changed in the past years. So one recommendation targets mobile solutions, where we consider that mobile devices like smartphones and tablets are considered as the primary devices where two-factor authentication is used. The second one considers energy sources. Many participants had problems that the calculator-like devices ran out of batteries, or they also had like unusual batteries. So ideally, no energy sources will be required, but if so, there should be a standardization, like charging it via a USB-C cable. We have a similar recommendation on network use. So people were locked out of their accounts because the SMS, for instance, didn't arrive in time. Of course, we need network to perform the authentication in the first place. So here the network means that it's not dependent on the phone network, but it could also be that we have like a static device, like a smart TV and a gaming console that is like not connected to the internet, and we just want to authenticate here. So ideally, we wouldn't need any network at all. But as I said, it's just the ideal case. The second set considers customization. Remember, these little calculator-like devices, they have their own form factors, and here participants disliked that they needed something new, and even considered that everyday objects might be a solution here. So what about like integrating a two-factor authentication mechanism in something you already have, like a chain or like a ring that you wear or some kind of decorative object in your environment? Further, they consider personalization options would be nice. So what kind of item do I want to use? What kind of everyday object do I want to integrate it in? And even simple stuff like the color of the device. However, all devices have to be scalable. Now there is, on the one hand, standardization, but on the other hand, still banks use like different devices. So you need one device for each bank, and many people circumvent it by just using the smartphone, having a single point of failure. So here scalability is important. The second set of recommendations considers security. Here, we first consider user experience. First, we consider that there must be some way to recover from a loss. And when you have to order a new calculator online and wait 2 weeks until it arrives, that is not so easy. So here should be better options. And also the security perceptions of the users themselves are important, because people also consider this when using it. So people are willing to spend the extra effort if they see that there actually is a security benefit, but it's not always evident to users why that is so. The second set is interesting, considered side channel attacks, in particular, mostly shoulder surfing. So here participants considered that they do the authentication in the presence of a bystander, and that doesn't necessarily have to be a stranger. It could also be someone at their home. So they kind of wanted to have discrete solutions where you ideally wouldn't even know that someone is authenticating, or solutions where you don't have to dig out stuff like from your pocket and look for the item. Maybe you can just have it in your pocket and authenticate that way, such that no one can see it. And we've analyzed the state of the art. So in this table, I don't have to read it right now. So we considered solutions that are already on the market or available in papers in the context of our recommendations. And as you can see here, there are a lot of hyphens, means this recommendation is not covered. So there is a lot of room of improvement. And I, of course, refer to our paper for this in-depth, because we have an in-depth discussion to show like what is actually the current situation with 2FA mechanisms. And this also concludes my talk. So current 2FA mechanisms, unfortunately, poorly integrate into daily routines. We have a lot of problems identified in the paper, and of course, this few minutes I'm talking here can't cover all of that. So we have to rethink two-factor authentication. In this paper, we present the first step for that with 10 recommendations considering interaction design and security. Thanks for your attention. If you have a question, just drop me an email or contact me on Twitter. Bye.